What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/IDontWorkHereLady. Alright, this story's called, Do You Know to Do You Job? I figure I should start off the new year right with some positivity. So, this story is positively one of my favorites from my retail work experience. I used to work at a department store, specifically in the shoe department of the store, and my manager was a total Karen, so we will call her Karen. She was incredibly sexist and always blamed the males in the department for everything while letting the females get away with murder. Some of her remarks were pretty borderline harassment too, and it didn't help that HR department was practically non-existent and more like the Karen department. Anyway, this story takes place on one of those you are entitled to your mandatory 30-minute break but you can't leave the sales floor unattended, so let that be a warning type of days. A day where the females often abandoned posts, taking hour-long breaks and hiding in other departments, leaving myself and a fellow male coworker to fend for ourselves. Basically every Saturday. This was a weekend after the bigwigs from corporate had decided to take a tour of the store. Something about a changing of upper management. We call it the changing of the guard. It is the kind of visit where managers start acting like the Pope is paying a visit. That in itself is another I don't work here story. As soon as they approached the shoe department, several customers saw suits with gold name tags. Before the customers could get a "Do you work here" out, the bigwigs were gone in a flash, with the managerial entourage struggling to keep up, but I digress. After the visit, a few people from corporate, not from the bigwig party, decided to stay behind and make sure things were running a bit smoothly. One of them was an apparel and shoe buyer for the entire company. We will call him Ted. Now, Ted shows up at the department unannounced. He doesn't like to make a big deal of things. I take notice of him as he walks through the aisles taking notes for whatever reason. I figure he has an important job to do, so I leave him be. After I run back and forth between about 10 customers, my coworker is busy with his own customers on the other side of the department. My manager comes striding up to me after I finish with my last customer. "Follow me," she tells me, grabbing my hand, practically leading me like a toddler who had to be put in timeout. Turns out, Karen had led me right up to Ted. "Sure, I can see if we have a size for you," he tells a customer with a shoe in his hand. Karen snatches the shoe right out of his hand and shoves it into my chest. "Why are you making Ted do your job? You get it." I glance up at Ted, who looks absolutely livid. I have no idea what shoe size to get, but I just wanted to get the hell out of there. However, Ted holds out his hand, non-verbally asking me for the shoe back. I comply, knowing full well, although my manager had asked me to get it, someone higher up the food chain asked for it back. His face changes in a blink of an eye, from fury to downright pleasant. "Hang on for just a minute while I'll be right back, okay? Thank you." Karen and I are rooted in place. Although I know there are customers that need help, I don't dare move from this spot. I know the gears are turning in her head as she tries to place the blame on me. Ted returns shortly after and hands the customer their desired shoe and thanks them for their patronage and to let them know if they need any more help. Ted rejoins the circle and I can feel the tension radiating from it. Also seems to be keeping everyone else away as no one approaches. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't make a huge scene and speaks only loud enough for us to hear. "Where the hell do you get off telling me what I can and cannot do?" asks Ted. Karen doesn't say a word. "All day I've seen this young man running around, helping every single customer under the sun without any breaks. I am getting exhausted just watching him. I can't imagine how he must feel." Karen's lips are now so thin, they are practically non-existent. "Just because I don't work here doesn't mean that I cannot help customers. I am an employee of this company. I know how to do my job, even if it means getting my hands dirty and getting shoes for people. Do you know how to do yours?" Just because Karen is a Karen, doesn't mean she isn't smart. She knows full well it is a loaded question and does not answer. "Go back to your hidey hole and leave us alone," says Ted with a tone of finality. He turns around just in time to see another customer. "Hi there, what can I get for you today?" This is the first time I have ever seen Karen utterly defeated.
"It's good having him here,"
is all she manages to say. "Yes, Miss Karen," I reply as she walks away. A few months later, Karen is having an early retirement party. Ego a little deflated, but still full of the same harassment of a drunken, haggard old lady at the club who still thinks she's 40 years younger and trying to get all the guys to buy her drinks.
"We can't get everyone in the picture. Come sit down and let Mama sit in your lap." "I'm just kidding. Scoot over and we'll share a seat." "Okay, now everyone squeeze in." "Oh, you bad boy. I said squeeze in, not squeeze."
I shudder so hard it probably looks like I'm having a seizure. In case you're wondering, that wasn't me she was talking to, or committing acts of what may or may not be acts of harassment. As the Karen department, HR, doesn't really take female on male acts of harassment very seriously, but that's another can of worms all on its own. Who was she talking to? That is wildly inappropriate. But I'm glad she got shut down by our teddy boy here. That was pretty cool. Alright, this story's called Tales from a Vaccination Clinic Volunteer. So, I volunteer at a few vaccination clinics a week as a non-medical personnel. Generally, we do around 1,300 per clinic. My job is to sort people from a winding serpentine line, like at airport security, to one of the 1 to 6 lines where you'll get your actual jab. Each table has 2 nurses, and we all take a 15-minute lunch break in shifts. 2 quick bathroom breaks if we're lucky. My favorite part about the clinics, especially for older folks, is how nice they are and happy to be getting the vaccine. The late 70s and older folks are my favorites as they have experience with mass vaccination from the measles. When we get backed up and I have to wait for the lines to thin out, I get a nice chance to chat with some of them. When I say, "Sorry for the wait," when I have to pause, dozens, some days nearly 100 of them, when we're targeting older folks, will say something like, "Oh, I don't mind. This is much smoother than the measles vaccine site." So one of the nurses had the audacity to take her lunch break, which led to there only being 1 nurse for the line and it temporarily moving slower. Cue the Karen. She gets out of line to storm over to me to tell me her line only has 1 jabber, and I shouldn't have sent her to that line, complaining how slow it is compared to other people's lines, etc. I apologize and explain the nurse will be back from lunch soon, offered to get one of the county employees to come talk to her. Now here's an interesting part. Almost every time someone complains and I explain I'm a volunteer, and I look very young for my age, that I don't work there, and when I offer to get a manager, they become indignant and say some version of, "No, I'm talking to you." Karen was one of these folks. So the cop in my section and I have really bonded over the crazy people we have to deal with a few times a day. So he looks at me, huge eye roll, starts walking over with his chest puffed out and hands under his bulletproof vest to look imposing, and hover around Karen. She gets the message and gets back in line. Not 3 minutes later, she comes storming back to inform me she does crowd control professionally, so I should listen to her. Her latest bit of feedback is we need people going through the lines taking elderly people's coats and sweaters off of them before they get to the table. Sounds like a quick lawsuit to me. Cue the cop, her going back to her line. This process repeats every 2 or 3 minutes with her coming back to give new feedback and ideas. Now, the final time this happens, I genuinely have no idea what she was complaining about that time. I just tuned her out. This sweet little old lady, at least in her 80s, walker and all, was waiting at the door to be sorted and had seen Karen's perpetual berating from further back in the line.
"Excuse me?"
Karen still ranting about whatever the hell she's saying.
Excuse me. What? Has anyone ever told you you're a real bimbo?
Karen's mouth was agape for 20 seconds.
How dare you? No, how dare you? This young man is a volunteer and offered to get you a manager, and you're just being a bully.
Police officer walks over. I can see him having a harder time suppressing his laughter than I was. Karen demands the woman, probably 30 years older than her, be removed and that she wants to press charges. Cop laughs and says, "What for?" Yeah, it's cool hearing stories about the vaccination being administered to lots of people. It's cool. It's also pretty cool how the vaccine works. So basically, instead of having a weakened, diluted version of the virus, it's an mRNA based thing. So essentially, instead of making your body fight of the virus to learn how to, fight it, they basically just give your body instructions in the form of mRNA on how to fight off the virus. And it's pretty neat. So there's no risk of accidentally getting the full thing as opposed to, the weakened thing. But some people do have allergic reactions, so just make sure you're okay to take it. It's still neat, huh? Alright, this story's called This Isn't 1695. My kids attended a private school in Delaware. As a part of their 5th grade curriculum, they all visit Colonial Williamsburg. They've been doing this for many years. The school is pre-kindergarten to 12th grade, so a lot of families, like ours, have kids in several different grades, and they all talk about the trip to Williamsburg. It's a week they all look forward to, and they have all heard stories from the older kids about their trips. It is also the first extended 4-day overnight trip. Many parents are still reluctant to send their kids off on an overnight trip, so the 5th grade teaching team holds a lottery and selects several parents to go with the kids. The parents keep track of the kids during tours and meals, and they have their child and usually 2 others in their room. It can be pretty competitive to get a parent spot. When my daughter was in the 5th grade, I chaperoned, and a few years later, my husband went with my son. Here's the catch. The school totally buys into the idea of an immersive colonial experience. I'm assuming that authentic to the point where everyone is treated like a white guy. The kids all wear colonial outfits that week, they eat at a tavern, and get enlisted in the militia. They even have a colonial dance one night. So, some of the girls have more than one outfit. Sometimes parents borrow colonial clothes from other families with older children. Sometimes they are bots. A lot of them are made by the parents. They also have a collection of clothes in a colonial closet that kids are able to borrow from. Often, parents donate the clothes from their kids after the last one goes. Here's the kicker. Parents are also supposed to dress up in colonial outfits. So I made outfits for my daughter and myself. It was way more work than I thought it would be. They turned out great. Obviously, a few years later, when it was my son's turn, he could not wear the dresses. Coward. My husband also was chosen to chaperone. No way was I making full colonial outfits for the boys. So we called Opera Delaware and were able to borrow colonial clothes for both my husband and my son. One of the neat things about Colonial Williamsburg is that the historic interpreters that give tours and operate the businesses are in period dress and act as if they were living during the colonial era. Oh god, hide the minorities. One day, the kids were eating lunch in one of the taverns. My husband, who is an attorney, needed to check his email and messages. So while the kids were eating, he ran outside to try and get better phone reception. He was dressed in full-on colonial clothes. An older lady, we can call her Karen, came stomping up to him.
What are you doing?
Huh?
You are supposed to be in character. You shouldn't have that phone out. There were no phones during colonial times.
Husband realizes he is in colonial clothes and the kids weren't anywhere to be found. Ma'am, I don't work here. I'm just a chaperone. That left Karen very confused. I mean, why would a grown man visit Williamsburg dressed in period clothing? Sounds cool.
Well, still, you shouldn't be out here on a phone. People won't know.
That was the last time my husband chaperoned on a school trip. That's funny. That sounds really cool. I want to check out Colonial Williamsburg, hit up a tavern, and, make merry with a bunch of other people also at the tavern, flipping coins as payment. Sick. Or like, killing a squirrel outside and just giving them that as payment. Alright, this story's called, As the Next Door Neighbor, I Must Clearly Be the Landlord. My neighbors were moving out of the house they had been renting next to me for the last 2 years, and while I was sad to see them go, I completely understood that they were fed up with the condition of the house and the landlord's dismissiveness to their complaints. They took on far more home improvement and maintenance than they should have been responsible for, some of which I helped them with as we were all friends. After they had vacated and the house was on the market, I was bombarded with all manner of questions from potential buyers and realtors whenever I was outside, usually in the vein of, how recently was the roof replaced, and questions about flooding. Mostly I was able to answer and did so pleasantly, mostly. This one realtor, I'll call him Ted because he looked like Ted Danson from The Good Place. Anyway, Ted catches me going out to check my mail one afternoon after a long night of taste testing my bourbon to make sure it was still good. Oh, fun fact, Ted Danson looks exactly like my dad if my dad was old, like an old man, and white. Ted Danson's in his 70s, my dad's under 50. Looks just like him, it's crazy. Anyway, Ted darts across the lawn to me and starts firing off some pretty rude questions.
Why didn't the previous tenants take care of this place? It's a real dump inside. Were they crackheads? Who installed the washing machine? Why did they leave it so dirty?
Okay, Ted, because I really needed this right now. But again, always try to be polite. I tell Ted that as far as I knew, no, the previous neighbors weren't crackheads, and they actually put in more than their fair share of the upkeep. Apparently that was not sufficient for mighty Ted.
Well, what about the washing machine and the track lighting? Was that done by a professional?
At this point, I'm getting pretty close to being done with this whole affair. I don't know, Ted. I've been living in this house over here, not the one you're trying to sell.
But surely you would know something about that.
No, dude. I'm not the landlord or the owner of that property. So, yeah.
Well, did you at least see some contractors over here doing any work?
Having completely lost it with this clown. Are we done? Can I go back inside my house now? I don't know. Ted looked pretty taken aback, but honestly, if he had a shred of self-awareness, I wouldn't have yelled at him. His clients looked embarrassed, and who could blame them? Great way to meet the neighbors, by having your realtor badger them with dumb questions. Nice guy OP, dummy-headed Ted. Dummy-head Ted. I like that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.